was watching Sargon of Akkad. In England, they're putting the English flags all over the place. There's been a huge shift in how the Western world thinks about itself. I was talking about this recently with some family member. Their old Germanic attitude from like the time of Caesar was that if you just adopted the ways of the tribe, you would be integrated into the tribe. Whenever they're fighting Germanicus, one of the offers that they make to the legions is that if they just give up fighting for Rome, then they can have German wives and be integrated into the tribe. And so for like thousands of years, the sort of Germanic attitude has been, if you just integrate yourself, we don't really care where you've come from or what you look like, but you have to become part of us. You have to be grafted in, you have to adopt our way of doing things. And the English are Anglo-Saxons, and the Angles and the Saxons both are Germanic tribes, and the Scandinavians are Germanic. And if you're Spanish, like old Spain Spanish, the Visigoths are Germans, and the French, if you're talking about the Franks, which there's more variation in France. There's a lot of variation. There's more variation in a lot of these places. I'm oversimplifying, but like the Gauls are not exactly Germanic, but the Franks are, and so they really don't like cities. Traditionally, they want to live out in, away from anybody, was why they keep on spreading out, and they have these waves of migration. There's a lot of German blood in the United States, and then we're also English, which is also Germanic ultimately. They keep on spreading out, and so a lot of these sort of cultural attitudes about like, well, wherever you come from is fine as long as you become one of us. We don't really care what you look like. That attitude is pretty much thousands of years old. And we don't like cities. We don't like stacking ourselves on top of each other. We want to spread out, and we want to live in rural areas. Is also a very Germanic ethos from very ancient times. These kinds of cultural attitudes have a lot of staying power. And this sort of attitude that everybody is pretty much interchangeable regardless of their heritage or their blood is a very relatively recent phenomenon. It's a very recent idea that it really doesn't matter where you come from or what your heritage is. We're all pretty much interchangeable. Everybody's just a human, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. In historical terms, this would be incomprehensible to anybody who lived before the 20th century, and even well into the 20th century, this would have been incomprehensible. The American founders said the country was for them and their posterity, which is their children. And if you had said to them, everybody is made in the image of God and is deserving of equal dignity before God, they would have said, yes, absolutely. Regardless of what the historical revisionists want to say, as far as the attitudes of the founders, the American founders are concerned, everybody's made in God's image. Everybody's equal in dignity before God. Yes, 100%. And if you had gone a step further and said, well, everybody has equal claim to the United States, to its institutions, to participate in its economy, to live on its land, they would have looked like you were a crazy person. No. The United States is for us and our posterity. We know who's here. We know their heritage, their culture. They're going to maintain it. It belongs to us. We built it. We're going to maintain it. It's ours, and it belongs to us and our kids. This is not to abrogate your standing before God. And the kind of bleeding of these delineations of your value as a human being into living with white people as a human right is it's bonkers. It's crazy. It's got no bearing on reality. Living with white people is not a human right. Living in the United States is not a human right. Living in a Western country is not a human right. And the people who built the country and for whom the country was built and their children, their posterity, have the right to determine who is allowed to live in the country, who is allowed to participate in the process, who is allowed to be part of the tribe. And if you're going to have a certain amount of intermarriage and communion on the peripherals of every society, and that's normal. But what you have now is mass migration of huge numbers of people who are overturning cultures and societies and threatening to totally overrun the legacy, the heritage of the birthright of Western societies, Western cultures, Western people. Because there's so many of them, they're not integrating, they're forming enclaves, they're moving to vote out of existence the institutions of the places that they are now living in. And if things go to hell, they get to go home. Where do we go? This is it for us. And they come, Johnny come lately, and they pretend like they have as much right to it as we do because of human rights. These people don't believe in human rights. Generally speaking, they use words like a tool to acquire what they want. They don't believe in principles as such. They believe in achieving ends. And whatever methods or tools that they can use to achieve those ends are acceptable. The principles are not relevant to them. And what it basically fundamentally comes down to is the Tower of Babel project, where you have, after the flood, everybody speaks one language. Let's not be scattered across the earth. Let's be united. Let's stay in one place. Let's stack ourselves on top of each other. Let's build a tower to heaven to keep everybody together. One tribe, one tongue, one religion, one state, one global power. And God says, no, I don't think so. We're not letting that happen. And he confuses their language in order to force them to disassociate from one another. What does Stephen say in Acts before they stone him? God created the nations and set their times and their boundaries so that they might seek after him. He creates the nations with a purpose, for a reason. And that reason is to create conditions which make it possible for those nations to get to know him better. The reason that people are divided up into nations and have certain borders is so that they can get to know God better. And if you take Stephen's word and what he says is in the scripture, then the borders are not arbitrary. The borders are not arbitrary. You might think that the borders are drawn by the arbitrary hand of men or random chance. Not according to Stephen. Not according to Stephen in the book of Acts. The borders are not arbitrary. They're not just random lines on a map. The desire to create a borderless world is a desire to build the Tower of Babel. It's the same project. Ever since the Tower of Babel failed, the enemy, or Satan, or the powers of the New World Order, since time immemorial, have been trying to figure out a way to get that project going again, so that they can have control, so they can create a system to shut God out. The nations exist for a reason. The borders exist for a reason. Their times and boundaries exist for a reason. It's not arbitrary. It's not really random or just a result of the confluence of human will. God is directly involved in where one nation ends and another begins. So this kind of modern idea that we're all basically fungible units and we're all interchangeable is just a wild and grotesque extrapolation of certain biblical principles misapplied by a secular mind. All men are created equal, and they're equal before their creator. They're not equal in any other context. It's not a question of superiority or inferiority. It's just a question of reality. Do you know a single other human being who is equally as good looking, equally as intelligent, equally as capable as you are? Whether it's to a greater or a lesser degree, either direction. They're all different from you in one way or another. The promise of communism is equality, but the only equality that communism can offer to anybody is the equality of the grave. Jesus said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." And the word he uses in Greek is ethnos. And churchianity, the culture of churchianity, has taken this for a long time, the Great Commission, and run with it as, "Go therefore and make disciples of all kinds of individuals among the nations." That's not really what Jesus said. He said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, all ethnos, all ethnic groups. Corporately, make disciples of the nations." On a corporate level. And he appointed apostles, which is a military term for a Roman officer who is meant to impact the culture of a conquered region, to reflect Rome. The apostles were appointed to impact the culture of regions where Christianity was spreading, to get that culture to reflect Christ. But you can't make disciples of all nations if the nation doesn't exist. If there's no such thing as nation. If the differences between us are merely cosmetic and have no other significance of any kind, then a lot of the language that's used in the scriptures is incomprehensible. The language of "go therefore and make disciples of all nations" is incomprehensible in an ethos where the nation doesn't exist, where the blood doesn't make any difference, where the heritage is of no significance, where nobody has a claim to the land or the institutions on the basis of their heritage, and nobody can pass on to anyone their land or their institutions on the basis of them being their posterity. If you eliminate these ideas, whole sections of the scripture become incomprehensible. And as far as the church is concerned, for most of the recent history of the church, these ideas have just been completely ignored. These things have been ignored. They haven't been resolved. How do you reconcile what Stephen says? The nations are created by God. Their times and their borders are created by God so that they may seek after him. How do you reconcile the Lord coming down and confusing the language to prevent the Babel project from keeping everyone in one tribe, keeping everyone under one tongue, keeping everyone under one state? How do you reconcile these things and also say the blood is of no significance, the heritage is of no significance, your ethnicity is of no significance, and everything else that God does, there is always multiple layers of meaning, multiple layers of purpose, multiple layers of significance, multiple layers of design for the purpose of his kingdom, of drawing people closer to him. And yet whenever it comes to this, it doesn't matter. It's of no significance. There's only one layer of meaning here, and it's purely cosmetic. Literally nothing else follows that pattern. Nothing else in anything that God has created follows that pattern. Nothing else is purely cosmetic. Literally nothing. You would have a hard time convincing somebody who said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations," that there's no meaningful significance to the existence of a nation, or that nations shouldn't or don't exist, that there's no meaningful distinctions between them. Don't take it up with me. I didn't say it. And I think we're living in an era when this Tower of Babel project is falling flat on its face. In Daniel, the feet of iron mixed with clay, you don't have to take my word for it, look it up. The feet of iron mixed with clay, he says, the people are not of one community and they won't hold together because they can't cooperate with one another. Iron mixed with clay doesn't stick together. They can't cooperate. They're not going to hold together. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. And what does it say? A boulder not cut by human hands rolls down the mountain and strikes the statue on its feet. And the entire thing comes crumbling down and there is no trace of it left. All of it is blown away like chaff. The head of gold, financial control, arms of silver or torso of silver, arms of bronze, legs of iron, financial, occultic, cultural, military control. They also correspond to world empires. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. But they're all one. They're all one statue. And finally, the feet of iron mixed with clay, which is the final culmination, the mass migration, the mixing of everything together, the obliteration of identities, the obliteration of national boundaries, the obliteration of separated languages, of separated national identities, which, according to Stephen, were created by God so that the nations would seek after God, so that the nations would seek after him, to create conditions where people could get to know God and come to him. The project of obliterating boundaries, of obliterating borders, of obliterating national identities is in direct contravention to God's design, to God's plan. According to Stephen, this is this is directly contradictory to God's will for the earth. What their project is of obliterating these boundaries is directly contradicting God, and I posit it's an attempt functionally to rebuild the Tower of Babel, to keep everyone under one state so that they can cut God out. If you're not thinking about these things, especially now, especially the way the current climate is, what are you doing? Because the temperature is only going to go up.